So when you mention the word Liverpool, it conjures up many images. Famous football clubs, Aintree Racecourse, the Beatles, the River Mersey. There are many things that the word Liverpool conjures up in your mind. But for me, the most significant place is this building, and that is because it had a significant impact on my life and shaped a lot of the work that I've done subsequently. So let's explore why this building is of so much significance to me. So the building that you can see here is a famous landmark in Liverpool. It's the Littlewoods building. The Littlewoods Company was once the biggest private company in Europe, and it had two divisions. It had a retail division, but the one that we're most interested in is the sports betting division. And the sports betting division was known primarily because it was the Littlewoods Pools.
Those who ended up quids in were 7 locals from Bermondsey's Hand and Marigold, a shy retiring group. For a stake of £1.70 each, they've now got £64,000 apiece, a total of nearly £500,000.
So long before I was of the legal age to gamble, I still found an outlet for my fascination with numbers and statistics and games of chance through the football pools, or I should say my dad's football pools. And they were very similar to the lottery because you would have a selection of numbers, 58 on this particular example, and you would have to find 8 draws in those 58, any 8 from 58 basically, very similar to the lottery. And like the lottery, you would win the jackpot if they came in, but you may have to share it if other people had picked exactly the same matches. However, there was a big difference between the football pools and the lottery in a very important way.
Can you tell us how you fill in your football coupons?
Yes, I get the league table and the form of the teams and see how they've been getting on in recent matches. And if a team playing at home is low in the league and playing a team that's high in the league, I generally give that as a draw.
So the interesting thing about the football pools, and the thing that attracted me to it, is most people entered the football pools at random, whereas in fact I knew that I could actually predict which matches were more likely to be drawn. Now compare that to the lottery. When the balls drop down, you can't predict which ball is going to come out, but with football I could actually go in, do some analysis and actually work out which matches were more likely to be drawn and how many draws were more likely to occur in any certain week or another. And if you're interested in learning how to do that, I have produced some videos on predicting the outcomes of football matches. But basically this was the first step of 2 that I used in order to tip the odds in my favour. So one of the things that you could do on the football pools that you couldn't do in the lottery is you could actually enter a number of selections. Instead of just having to pick 8 draws, you could actually pick any 8 from 10, or any 8 from 12, or any 8 from 15. But it did mean that you would have to enter a large number of lines. However, the cost of entering on the football pools was much, much lower than the lottery, so this was perfectly viable. However, even that wouldn't be able to achieve a payoff, so I had to come up with what we would call an optimal covering combination. And the way that you would do that on the football pools is you would actually write it on the coupon, you would get that approved by the pools company, and then if they approved your covering combination, then you could actually enter your selections and give them instructions as to how to interpret them. And this was the key thing for me to be able to win on the football pools. I entered matches that were more likely to be drawn. If the coupons didn't have enough matches on it or the wrong type of selections, I would place no bet. But if I did place a bet, I would use an optimal covering combination. And that optimal covering combination would dramatically increase my chances of winning the jackpot. So at this point in my career, I became fascinated by permutations, combinations, and optimal covering. And it sounds complicated, but what we were trying to do is find 8 draws from 58, and therefore there were a large number of combinations that would do that. I just needed to narrow down my selections and narrow down how that was covered. So I actually wrote a little algorithm that would basically spit out all of the possible combinations, and what I've done on this example here is I basically said, give me every combination of 3 from 5. So we're saying we've got 5 football matches. How can I arrange them so that I cover every single outcome in that particular set? And this is what is known as a combination. You know, this is listing all of the possible combinations of that set. And I did that and then took it up to another level by looking at optimal covering combinations that would allow me to capture all of those draws in the most efficient manner possible. So to summarize here, before 1994, there was no national lottery in the UK. The only way that you could put a small amount of money down to win an absolute fortune was to be able to do that on the football pools, which essentially was a lottery. It worked in exactly the same way as a lottery, apart from what you were doing instead was actually picking football matches that were likely to end in a draw. Now, the benefit of that was that I was able to predict which matches were more likely to end in a draw. And then I used an optimal covering combination to be able to line them up so that I could actually win a jackpot. Did I win a jackpot? Yes, I did. And in fact, I actually won hundreds of dividends, although most of them were minor. However, that enabled me to line up all of the matches on the coupon in such a way that eventually it was likely that I was going to win a much larger amount, which is exactly what happened. So the theory worked. I was able to find matches that were likely to draw. I was able to pick the weeks in which I was going to make my entry, and I was able to enter enough tickets, if you wanted to put it that way. I was able to do an optimal covering combination of many entries that would guarantee that they would all line up and find those elusive 8 from 58. So yeah, it worked beautifully well, apart from when the government decided to throw a spanner in the works and they decided to do a national lottery, and that completely killed the football pools. My fun and games were completely over, unfortunately. However, I decided that what I would do is take this concept to bookmakers and start to do similar things with bookmakers to try and identify matches that would more likely end in a draw and then arrange them in a certain way. However, I came unstuck very, very quickly there, because as soon as they realized what I was trying to do, I found that I couldn't bet anymore in this particular manner. They weren't interested in people winning. And I got banned from the bookmakers. Basically, nobody would take my bets. So I went off and started working seriously in financial markets that I did for a number of years. And that would lead me to discover betting exchanges during a presentation in the late 90s, early 2000s. And that got me interested in betting exchanges. Then suddenly the whole thing went full circle and I ended up becoming one of Betfair's very first customers. And the rest, as they say, is history. And I have now spent over 20 years working on betting exchanges and basically putting all of the knowledge that I've learned over a number of years into being able to trade and bet on betting exchanges successfully. So yeah, it's funny how life works out, isn't it?